She was 3 years old. She had dark hair and pigtails, a gap-toothed smile, and a white sailor dress that her father had bought her because she twirled in it every single time she put it on. On a quiet spring morning in Louisville, Kentucky, she climbed into the back seat of her mother's car, buckled in her car seat, and waved goodbye to her daddy through the rear window. That wave, that tiny, innocent, completely ordinary wave, was the last time Joseph Newton ever saw his daughter. Her name was Michelle Marie Newton. Everyone who loved her called her Shelley. And what happened to her over the next 42 years is one of the most haunting, most heartbreaking, most quietly devastating missing child cases this country has ever produced. Not because there was violence, not because there was blood or ransom notes or strangers in the night, but because a little girl was taken by the one person in the world she trusted most, her own mother, and then the world simply moved on. The flyers faded. The tips dried up. The databases archived her name. And Shelley Newton grew up somewhere, under a different name, in a life her father knew nothing about, while he kept her bedroom exactly the way she left it. Pink sneakers by the door. Stuffed animals lined up on the dresser. A crib still assembled, just in case. For 42 years, Joseph Newton waited. And in the spring of 2025, everything changed. This is the story of Michelle Marie Newton. This is Story Soft the Missing J. And I need you to stay with me for every single minute of this one, because it matters. Before we go any further, if you believe these families deserve to be heard, hit that like button right now, leave a comment below, and subscribe to Story Soft the Missing J. Every single click tells the algorithm that missing people matter, that cold cases matter, that Shelley matters. Now, let's go back to where this all began. It is the spring of 1983, and the world feels ordinary in the way that only the past can feel in hindsight, warm and routine and completely unaware of what is coming. Ronald Reagan is in the White House. Flashdance is playing in every cinema across America. In the blue-collar neighborhoods of Louisville, Kentucky, life moves at the kind of steady, working-class rhythm that people build entire lives around without ever questioning it. Shift work and church on Sundays. Neighborhood barbecues and front porch evenings. The kind of community where everybody knows your car and your dog's name and whether your kid has been sleeping through the night. Joseph Newton, Joe, to everyone who knows him, is 33 years old. He is not a complicated man, and he would tell you that himself. He works hard. He comes home. He loves his family. He and his wife Debra have been married for several years, and their daughter Michelle, born on the 5th of October, 1979, is, without question or competition, the absolute center of his universe. Shelley is 3 years old in the spring of 1983, and by every account from everyone who ever knew her, she is one of those children who seems lit from the inside, bright and curious, and physically unable to walk past another person without stopping to offer them a hug. She loves her stuffed animals. She loves her little sailor outfits, the ones her dad buys her because she spins in them across the living room floor with her arms outstretched like she's trying to take off. She loves riding on Joe's shoulders during evening walks through the neighborhood, gripping his hair with her tiny hands and pointing at dogs and birds and anything else that catches her attention. The Newton family is, by every measure, a normal American family in 1983. And like a lot of normal American families, they are chasing something slightly better just over the horizon. That spring, Joe has an opportunity. A job in Georgia, better pay, warmer weather, lower cost of living. The kind of fresh start offer that working-class families evaluate with a combination of hope and practicality. After talking it over, Joe and Debra agree. This is the right move. This is their next chapter. The plan they settle on is simple and sensible. Debra will go down first with little Shelley. She will scout the area, look at apartments, find the right place, get things set up so that when Joe follows, the transition is smooth and the family is ready to start their new life together. Joe will stay behind to wrap up everything in Louisville, give notice at work, handle the sale of the house, deal with all the unglamorous administrative details that come with moving a life from one state to another. It is a good plan, a logical plan, the kind of plan that thousands of American families have executed without incident. On the morning of the 2nd of April, 1983, Debra packs a suitcase. She bundles 3-year-old Michelle into the car. She kisses Joe goodbye. She says, according to the statements Joe would later give to police, "We'll be waiting for you." Shelley waved from her car's seat through the rear window. Joe waves back. He watches the car turn the corner and disappear. He goes back inside. He expects a phone call that evening. Maybe the next morning at the latest. Something simple. Something ordinary. "We made it. The place is small, but it'll do." And then the plans would continue falling into place, one predictable step at a time. The call never comes. That first evening passes quietly. Joe assumes they're still driving, or tired from the road, or busy getting the lay of the land. He makes dinner. He watches television. He goes to bed expecting the phone to ring. It does not ring. The next morning, nothing. He tries the number Debra had mentioned for a potential rental in Clayton County, Georgia. No answer. No voice made. Nothing. He calls again that afternoon. Nothing. He tells himself there is an explanation. Maybe the number was wrong. Maybe they stopped somewhere along the way. Maybe Debra got busy looking at apartments and lost track of time. He is not a man who panics easily. But the silence stretches. Days go by, then a full week. Joe calls mutual friends, family members in the area, anyone who might have seen a Kentucky-plated sedan or heard from Debra. Nobody has. He calls the phone number again and again and again until the sound of it ringing unanswered becomes something like a physical sensation in his chest. Worry becomes dread. Dread becomes something he does not have a name for yet. He contacts the Louisville Police Department. At first, officers handle it the way officers in the early 1980s routinely handled this kind of call. Carefully, gently, with the quiet assumption that this is a domestic situation. A marital disagreement. A woman who needed some space and took it. Parental abductions in the early 80s were not uncommon. Custody disputes played out in gas station parking lots and across state lines with some regularity. And more often than not, the situation resolved itself when emotions cooled and people came back to the table. But Joe is not describing a marital dispute. He is describing a silence, so complete it feels like a wall. And as weeks become months, even the officers who initially tried to manage his expectations begin to shift their tone. By late spring of 1983, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office opens a formal missing persons investigation. Bulletins go out for Debra Newton, 24 years old, and her daughter Michelle Marie Newton, age 3. Flyers go up in truck stops and post offices and churches across Kentucky and down into Georgia. The description is heartbreakingly ordinary. A young mother and her toddler, last seen leaving home for what was supposed to be a family relocation. Joe cooperates with investigators completely. He gives them every detail he can remember. The last conversations he and Debra had about the move, the route they had planned to take south on Interstate 75, the name of the apartment complex Debra had mentioned in passing as a possible landing spot in Clayton County. He answers every question without hesitation. And then he does something that would define the next 4 decades of his life. He gets in his car and drives to Georgia. He knocks on doors in Clayton County. He shows photographs to strangers in parking lots. He walks into apartment complexes and asks leasing agents if they have seen this woman and this little girl. He checks truck stops and diners along the I-75 corridor, holds up the photograph of Debra and Shelley to cashiers and waitresses and anyone who will give him 30 seconds of their time. Nobody has seen anything. He drives home. He keeps the pink sneakers by the door. The investigation moves forward the way investigations do in the absence of evidence, slowly, methodically, and with the particular kind of institutional frustration that comes from a case that has no crime scene, no witnesses, no ransom note, and no blood. Just absence. The total, clean, bewildering absence of 2 people who were here and then were not. Detectives from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office make the drive to Clayton County, Georgia, themselves. They canvass apartment complexes along the streets Debra had mentioned. They show photographs to property managers and leasing agents. They talk to utility companies, asking whether any account had been opened in the name Debra Newton. They contact the post office, looking for any forwarding address. Nothing. No lease. No electricity account. No trace of a Kentucky-plated sedan. No trace at all. They expand the search radius. Atlanta, Macon, Savannah, Every major city along the Interstate 75 corridor gets a query. State troopers across Georgia are asked to be watchful. The National Crime Information Center enters Debra and Michelle into the system as a fugitive and a missing person. And then, somewhere between late 1984 and early 1985, the silence breaks just once. Just briefly. Just enough to confirm that Debra Newton is alive and has chosen every moment of this silence deliberately. She calls Joe. The conversation, according to police summaries released later, is short, tense. She offers no explanation for where she has been. No location. No reason. A few words, and then the line goes dead. And after that, nothing. No more calls. No more contact. No postcards. No whispered messages passed through mutual acquaintances. No clues left behind in the quiet hope of being found. The last thread snaps. In the summer of 1985, a Jefferson County grand jury hands down an indictment. Debra Lee Newton is charged with custodial interference, a felony in the state of Kentucky with no statute of limitations when a child is taken across state lines. The Federal Bureau of Investigation gets involved, issuing an unlawful flight to avoid prosecution warrant. And for a period that must have felt, briefly, like momentum, Debra Newton's face appears on a list that very few people are ever placed on. The FBI's top 8 most wanted parental kidnapping fugitives. Her photograph goes up in federal buildings. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children creates an age-progressed sketch of Michelle, showing the world what the little girl in the sailor dress might look like now as she grows toward school age. That image circulates through law enforcement channels, through news segments, through the thick packets of missing child information that advocacy organizations mail to post offices and community centers across the Southeast. America's Most Wanted covers the case. Reader's Digest runs a mention. Tips start coming in. A woman matching Debra's description. Someone thinks they saw her working in a diner in Chattanooga. Investigators check it out. Negative. A child matching Michelle's description was spotted at a county fair in Alabama. Investigators check it out. Negative. A new family moved in next door to someone in Florida, a quiet mother and daughter who keep to themselves and never quite fit in. Investigators check it out. Negative. Each dead end costs something. Time, money, and the most precious, most non-renewable resource in any missing child case, hope. Joe drives to many of those locations himself. He sits in his car outside addresses that investigators have given him. He watches women walk out of grocery stores and post offices and laundromats, his eyes moving over each face with the kind of desperate concentration that 40-something years later still brings tears to his eyes in interviews. He is looking for the face he last saw kissing his daughter goodbye in their Louisville driveway. He is looking for Shelley's eyes in a stranger's face. He never finds them, but he never stops looking. In 1986, he sits down for a local television interview. His voice cracks when he looks into the camera and says, quietly, "Wouldn't you want a child back? At least to see her grow up, to know she's safe." He goes home after that interview and sits in Michelle's room for a long time. The stuffed animals are on the shelf, exactly where she left them. The small pair of pink sneakers is still by the door. The crib is still assembled. Joe Newton does not take any of it apart. He cannot explain why, exactly, except that taking it apart would feel like a decision he is not ready to make. So he leaves it, and he waits. The 1990s arrive, and the case does what cold cases almost always do when leads stop coming in. It retreats. Not closed. The file remains open, technically active, assigned to detectives who are also carrying dozens of other open cases and who pull the Newton folder out once a year, skim the contents, run the name through whatever databases are new that season, find nothing, and put it back in the metal cabinet. New detectives rotate onto the case. They read the thick folder. They shake their heads at how ordinary it all looks on paper. A mother and child. A plan move. A sudden break in contact. No ransom note. No straged. No blood. Just a family that was here and then was not. The tips slow to a trickle, then to almost nothing. In the early 90s, the FBI quietly removes Debra Newton from the top 8 most wanted list. The spotlight has moved on. There are newer cases, more violent cases, cases with evidence and suspects, and something investigators can actually work with. Joe keeps searching in his own way. He never remarries. He keeps Michelle's room exactly as it was. In the rare interviews he gives over the years, he always says the same thing, in more or less the same quiet voice. I just want to know she's okay. I don't care about anything else. Then come two blows that arrive years apart, but land with equal weight. In the year 2000, the Jefferson County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office dismisses the 1985 indictment against Debra Newton. The stated reason is procedural. Prosecutors cannot locate Joe Newton to confirm his willingness to testify at a potential trial. Joe had moved a handful of times over the years, new jobs, new addresses, and had not kept his current contact information current with the court. It is not a judgment about Debra's guilt. It is a paperwork casualty of time. The charge can be reindicted at any point because there is no statute of limitations. But the warrant is gone. The legal machinery that had been, however slowly, grinding toward accountability stops. 5 years later, in 2005, something even harder. Michelle's name is quietly removed from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's active database. The policy at the time allows cases to be archived when no credible leads have surfaced in years and there is no evidence suggesting foul play to the national system. Michelle Marie Newton, the little girl who waved through a rear car window at her father on a spring morning in 1983, is no longer considered an active missing child. She is presumed to be either living safely under a new identity or no longer alive. The second possibility is never stated outright, but it hangs in the air around every conversation about the case like something heavy and unspoken. Joe does not learn about the removal until months after it happens, when he calls the center to ask about the status of the most recent age-progressed photo. The representative on the phone explains the change as gently as possible. They took her off the list like she never existed, he tells a cousin afterward. He does not stop believing she is out there. He cannot explain why exactly. He just knows that if you're still watching at this point, drop a comment below with the words, "I'm still here." Let's see who is truly following this story, because we're just getting to the part that changes everything. The years move the way years do when you are waiting for something that may never come. 2010, 2012, 2014. Cold case units in Louisville pull the Newton file during their annual audits. They run Debra's name and social security number through every modern database they can access: credit bureau records, driver's license registrations, social security activity traces, postal service change of address records. They send formal queries to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Every search comes back empty. Then, in late 2015, a small crack appears in the wall. A distant relative of Debra's, someone who had maintained sporadic contact with the family over the years, reaches out to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. She had been watching a news segment about a woman arrested in Tennessee for an unrelated parental abduction, and something about it triggered a memory. She remembered Debra saying something once, years before the disappearance, something that had seemed at the time like an idle observation but had never quite left the relative's mind. Debra had said that if she ever needed to disappear, she would go somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere with palm trees. Florida, maybe. The tip is thin, almost nothing. A years-old memory of a casual comment made by a woman who had already been missing for more than 30 years. In a different department, with a different investigator, it might have gone nowhere. But it lands on the desk of a detective named Mark Harland. Harland is a veteran. He spent the better part of his career working homicide before moving to cold cases, a transition that many detectives make when they want to keep working but no longer have the stomach for fresh crime scenes. He does not believe in miracles. He has been doing this long enough to know that most tips lead nowhere and most cold cases stay cold. But he believes, genuinely and professionally, that every case deserves a fresh set of eyes every decade or so. Not because the evidence will be different, but because the investigator will be. He reopens the physical Newton file. He starts with the basics. He re-interviews Joe Newton, who is now in his late 60s. Joe is older and grayer and speaks more quietly than the man who gave that televised interview in 1986. But the story has not changed. Not one detail. He tells it the same way he has always told it, because it is not a story, it is a memory, and it is exactly as clear to him now as it was the morning it happened. Harlan pulls the original 1985 indictment. He reads through the grand jury transcripts. He confirms Joe's current address and willingness to cooperate, and then he does something that puts the case back on the books officially. He has prosecutors reissue the custodial interference warrant. It is now 2016. Michelle Newton will be 36 years old. Debra Newton would be 56. And for the first time in years, this case is breathing again. From there, the investigation enters a new phase. Slower, more methodical, quieter than anything that came before it. Harlan runs Debra's name and identifying information through every modern database he can access. He cross-references old tips against new technology, facial recognition software, reverse image searches using the old photographs, pattern matching tools that did not exist when this case first opened. He reaches out to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement again, this time with a more targeted and specific request. Any woman in her mid to late 50s living under an assumed name in a warm weather community who might approximate Debra Newton's physical description. Nothing comes back. Not yet. But the investigation keeps moving. And the world, meanwhile, is changing around it in ways that nobody in 1983 could have predicted. Genetic genealogy is no longer a science fiction concept. Commercial DNA companies are processing millions of samples from ordinary people searching for family history, ethnic background, and long-lost relatives. Ancestry, 23andMe, family tree DNA. People are logging on, spitting into tubes, mailing them away, and then receiving results that sometimes rewrite everything they thought they knew about themselves. Adoptees finding biological parents. Siblings discovering each other after decades of separation. Family secrets unraveling one centimorgans at a time. Law enforcement is paying attention. In 2018, investigators in California use a technique called investigative genetic genealogy to arrest the man they have been hunting for decades as the Golden State Killer. By uploading DNA evidence from old crime scenes to a public genealogy database, they identify a distant relative, build a family tree, and work forward through the generations until they arrive at a suspect. It is a breakthrough that sends shockwaves through law enforcement communities across the country. Harlan and his team begin talking about the possibilities for the Newton case. They have no crime scene DNA, no blood evidence, no fingerprints left behind in an empty house. But they have something potentially valuable. A living relative of Debra Newton, her younger sister Lisa, still living in Louisville. If they ever develop a credible suspect, a specific woman in a specific location claiming to be someone she might not be, a voluntary DNA sample from Lisa could be compared to confirm or eliminate that possibility. It is a long shot. Harlan knows it is a long shot. But in the spring of 2025, after nearly a decade of methodical, patient, often frustrating investigative work, the long shot finally pays off. The call comes in on a Tuesday afternoon, the 28th of April, 2025, 3:17 in the afternoon. It is logged through the Marion County Crime Stoppers anonymous tip line. Call number 487-2219. The caller is a woman. She speaks in the measured, deliberate tone of someone who has thought about this call for a while, who has rehearsed it, maybe, who knows exactly what she wants to say and is determined to say it before she loses her nerve. She has been reading about old missing children cases online. She explains. She found one from Kentucky, 1983. A little girl named Michelle Newton and her mother Debra. She looked at the age-progressed photographs that have been created over the years, the ones estimating what Debra might look like as she aged. And then she looked at a woman who lives in her community. A woman named Sharon Neely. She lives in the Villages, a large retirement community in Central Florida, probably in her mid-60s. Quiet, keeps to herself, does not talk much about where she came from or what her life looked like before she moved there. When the caller placed the old photograph of Debra Newton next to what she could find of Sharon Neely, the uncanny resemblance stopped her cold. She gives an approximate street name. She gives the name of the neighborhood. She says she does not know if it is anything, but she thought someone should check. Then she hangs up, and she disappears back into anonymity, her identity never recorded. Harlan listens to the recording 3 times. He has chased lookalikes before. He knows how this usually goes. But something about this tip is different from the ones he has tracked down and dismissed over the years. It is specific. It is calm. It is not hysterical or vague or fueled by some personal grudge he cannot verify. It names a real community, a real alias, and it references the exact kind of visual comparison that had always been the weakest link in this case. The bridge between who Debra Newton was in 1983 and who she might be now. He opens the file. He lays the old photographs out on his monitor. The 1983 snapshot on the left, Debra Lee Newton at 24. Dark hair parted in the middle. A soft smile. Eyes slightly downcast, like she is a little shy in front of the camera. Gentle features. Unremarkable in the way that makes disappearing easier. On the right, the NCMEC age progression from 2010, estimating what that same woman might look like at 54. The same dark hair with imagined gray threading through it. The same gentle slope of the jaw. The same quiet expression. He opens a new tab, logs into the Marion County Property Records portal, types in the name Sharon Neely. The name comes up immediately. A modest villa in the Finney section of the Villages. Purchased in 2011 with no mortgage. Property taxes paid on time. Utility accounts current. The date of birth on the record, October of 1960. That would make her 64 in the spring of 2025. Debra Newton's actual date of birth was July of 1959. She would be turning 65 that summer. Close. Consistent. Worth pursuing. Harlan prints the property record. Circles the address. Then he picks up the phone and calls Detective Carla Ruiz of the Marion County Sheriff's Office. A cold case investigator with nearly 20 years working in Central Florida, who has in her own career developed a particular instinct for the cases that other people have stopped paying attention to. He tells her what he has. A possible match on a parental abduction out of Kentucky, 1983. A woman living under the name Sharon Neely in the Villages. He needs a recent photograph. Something discreet. Nothing confrontational. A driver's license photo, if she can pull it, or a surveillance still from the community's entry gate. Ruiz does not hesitate. We can do better than that, she tells him. The Villages has one of the most active community Facebook groups you've ever seen. People post pictures of everything. Golf tournaments, book club meetings, holiday barbecues, 4th of July parties. Give me a couple of days. 48 hours later, 3 photographs arrive in Harlan's inbox. The first is from a 4th of July community picnic in 2023, posted publicly by the Finney Neighborhood Association. A woman in a wide-brimmed sun hat standing near a grill, smiling at the camera, holding a plate of potato salad. The second is a clearer shot taken from the side at the same event. Dark hair pulled back, the faint lines of crow's feet visible, the same gentle slope to the shoulders. The third is a driver's license scan that Ruiz has quietly requested through the Florida Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles database. Sharon Neely. Date of birth, the 15th of October, 1960. License issued in 2018. Harlan forwards all 3 photographs to the forensic imaging specialist at the Kentucky State Police Lab. The specialist runs a standard facial recognition comparison, measuring bone structure, the distance between the eyes, the geometry of the jaw and cheekbones, against the 1983 photograph and the 2010 age progression. The result comes back as a 92% similarity score. 92%. Not definitive. Facial recognition technology is probabilistic, not conclusive. It cannot walk into a courtroom by itself and put someone in a cell. But 92% is high enough, more than high enough, to justify the next step. Harlan books a flight to Florida. He and Detective Ruiz meet in Ocala, drive together to the Villages, and park on the quiet street across from the cul-de-sac where Sharon Neely's villa sits behind a row of well-kept hedges. They do not knock on the door. They do not approach the property. They wait. They wait on the first day. They wait on the second day. On the third day, a Friday, the 16th of May, 2025, a woman comes out of the villa. She is walking a small dog along the sidewalk, moving slowly, unhurried, the way people move in retirement communities where nobody is rushing anywhere. Ruiz photographs her through a long lens from inside the unmarked car. She takes frame after frame, profile, three-quarter angle, full face as the woman turns toward the street. Harlan downloads the images onto his laptop right there in the car. He opens the folder with the 1983 photographs. He places them side by side on the split screen, and the tightening in his chest begins. The shape of the cheekbones, the slight downward pull at the corners of the mouth when she is not smiling, the particular way she holds her head, tilted just slightly forward, the posture, the way she moves. These are not things that age progression software can capture. These are the things that a person who has looked at a photograph for 42 years notices in their bones before they can even articulate why. He does not say anything for a long moment. Then he closes the laptop, picks up his phone, and makes the call he has been preparing himself to make since 2015. Lisa, Debra's younger sister, still lives in the same East Side Louisville house where both women grew up. She is in her early 60s now, with the careful, measured stillness of someone who has spent a long time learning to live alongside grief. She was 21 in 1983. The aunt who used to come over on weekends and babysit little Shelley, who knew every one of her niece's favorite books and could name every stuffed animal on the shelf by heart. She has never stopped believing that Debra is alive somewhere, and she has never fully stopped carrying the weight of everything she did not see coming, the signs she might have missed, the questions she did not ask, the conversations she did not push far enough. Harlan drives to her house. He sits down at her kitchen table across from her. He sets the photographs down carefully, face up, and he takes a moment before he speaks. "I need to be very clear," he says. "We don't know anything for certain yet, but we have a woman in Florida who is living under a different name, and she looks very much like your sister. What we need from you, if you are willing, is a DNA sample, a simple cheek swab. We will compare it against a biological sample we are working to obtain from the woman in Florida. If there is a match, we will know." Lisa looks at the photographs for a long time. 42 years of not knowing sitting right there on the kitchen table between them. She picks up one of the photographs. She holds it. She sets it back down. And then she reaches for the DNA kit. The analysis that follows is conducted by the Kentucky State Police Forensic Lab, with support from a private genetic genealogy contractor. It is painstaking work, methodical, the kind of work that cannot be rushed without risking its integrity, and whose integrity will matter enormously if this case ever sees the inside of a courtroom. And then the results come back. The DNA sample obtained from the woman living in the Villages, Florida, as Sharon Neely, obtained quietly and legally through a discarded item collected during the period of surveillance, is compared against the voluntary sample provided by Lisa. The match is confirmed. The woman living in the Villages, Florida, under the name Sharon Neely is, beyond any reasonable scientific doubt, Debra Newton. The mother who drove away from a Louisville driveway on the 2nd of April, 1983, with a 3-year-old girl in a car seat and a plan to start a new life, and who then built that new life in a retirement community in Central Florida, under a name that is not her own, while her daughter's father kept a pair of pink sneakers by the door for 42 years. Harlan coordinates with Ruiz and Marion County law enforcement. On a Thursday morning in late May of 2025, investigators approach the villa in the Finney section of the Villages. The door opens. The woman inside is 65 years old. She is wearing a light cotton blouse. She has her small dog at her feet. When they say her real name, Debra Newton, something crosses her face. It is not shock exactly. It is the expression of someone who has been waiting for a knock on the door for 42 years and is no longer certain whether what they feel is dread or relief. She does not run. She is placed under arrest on the outstanding warrant for felony custodial interference, reissued in 2016 by the Jefferson County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. She has read her rights. She is transported to the Marion County Sheriff's Office for processing and extradition proceedings back to Kentucky. The door of the villa closes behind her. The small dog is taken in by a neighbor. Michelle Marie Newton, Shelley, is 45 years old in 2025. She has lived her entire conscious life under a name that is not the one on her birth certificate. She has built relationships, perhaps a career, perhaps a family of her own, in a world constructed on the foundation of a decision her mother made when she was 3 years old and had no say in anything. What she is told in the days and weeks that follow, how she learns the truth, what she thinks about it, how she processes it, is information that has not been made fully public, out of respect for a woman who did not ask for any of what happened to her, and who is navigating, at 45 years old, the collapse of everything she understood about herself. What is known as this? She is alive. She is safe. She is found. And somewhere in Louisville, Kentucky, a man in his mid-70s who has kept a pair of pink sneakers by a door for 42 years receives a phone call. The details of that conversation have not been released. Joe Newton has not given interviews since the resolution of the case, and that privacy is his by right after everything he has carried. But those of us who have followed this story can imagine, in some small way, what it might feel like to pick up a phone after 42 years and hear that she is out there, that she is okay, that the wave through the rear window was not the last moment, just the one that had to hold everything together until this one. The case of Michelle Marie Newton is not a story about a monster. It does not have a villain who lurks in shadows or a crime scene that makes the stomach turn. What it has is something that is, in many ways, harder to sit with than any of those things. A mother who chose to take her child. A father who never stopped searching. A little girl who grew up not knowing who she was. In a system, underfunded, overwhelmed, working with the tools of its era, that did the best it could for as long as it could and eventually let the file go quiet. What brought this case home was not any single dramatic moment. It was a decade of patient, methodical work by a detective who believed that cold cases deserve fresh eyes. It was the emergence of genetic genealogy as a tool that law enforcement is only beginning to fully understand how to use. It was a community database and a 4th of July photograph, and a neighbor who spent enough time looking at old missing persons cases online to recognize a face she saw every day. It was an anonymous caller who picked up the phone and said, "I don't know if this is anything, but I thought someone should check." It was a father named Joe Newton who kept a bedroom exactly the way his daughter left it. Every one of those things mattered. Every single one. And there are thousands of cases still waiting for that same combination. Thousands of files in thousands of metal cabinets. Thousands of families still asking the same question Joe asked every day for 42 years. Where are they? Are they okay? Does anyone still remember that they are missing? That is why we tell these stories. That is why Stories Soft the Missing J exists. Because remembering is not a passive act. Remembering is how we keep the pressure on. Remembering is how we make sure that the cases that time almost forgot stay just visible enough that the right person in the right moment decides to make the call. Shelley Newton's case is resolved. But there are others. So many others. And some of them are waiting for you. If this story moved you, if Shelley's story, Joe's story, 42 years of pink sneakers by a door moved you the way it moves me every single time I tell it, then I need you to do 3 things right now. Like this video, leave a comment below, and subscribe to Stories Soft the Missing J so you never miss another case. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because every view, every comment, every subscriber tells the algorithm that these stories matter, that missing people matter, that we have not forgotten them, and we never will. Until next time, keep searching, keep remembering, keep making the call. This is Stories Soft the Missing J.